You really need to learn how to properly release your fingers at the keyboard, which is what I'm going to explain right now. So let's get into it. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So in this video, I'm going to talk about how to properly release the fingers while playing the piano. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by talking about the importance of releasing the fingers, and then we're going to talk about what happens if we don't release the fingers. Then we're going to talk about how to properly release the fingers, and then at the end, we're going to talk about how to practice releasing the fingers. So basically, when we play the piano, we have to use all of our fingers. Our fingers are sort of the part of our body that touches the keyboard and puts the energy into the keyboard. And if we don't make sure that after we use a finger, we release it, what's going to happen is there's going to be a little bit of underlying tension there. The finger will tend to not release, or rather move to a new note quickly and efficiently. So it's really, really important that we make sure that we release fingers after we play. And that would look something like this. If I play my fifth finger, and then I play my fourth finger, and that finger just releases, and my fourth finger releases, and then my third finger releases. So you almost notice how it sort of like pops up like this, okay? And if you were to just feel my finger, you'd see that there's nothing happening in that finger. It's totally loose and released. And the analogy that I like to use for this, and kind of how this works and how to think about this, is it's sort of like when you walk. So you shift your weight from one leg to the next leg. But what happens when you go from your left leg, or your right leg rather, to your left leg? What happens is that your muscles sort of release, okay? Now obviously as you're moving your leg, your muscles still have to work to a degree, but the muscles that are involved in supporting those joints and making sure you don't fall down are not still tensed and sort of stiff, okay? They have to release. If we don't release our muscles as we move like that, what happens is that we get really, really tight and sore muscles. And it's the same thing in our hands, okay? So now that we understand why it's important to release the fingers, we want to talk about what happens if we don't release them. And we've already kind of talked about this. You may have seen this before when people play, and people complain about this a lot. They say, okay, I play my fifth finger, and then I play my fourth finger, and my fifth finger still plays, or I play my fourth finger and my fifth finger plays with my fourth finger, okay? Basically what's happening here is there's an underlying tenseness or tension in the hand that is causing problems, okay? So for instance, people will do this, they'll say, okay, I play my first, third, and fifth finger, and my fourth finger just goes down with it. What happens is that finger is being tensed along with the other fingers. And so it's really, really important to learn to be able to just release all the fingers, okay? They're not doing anything, they're just resting on the keys. And then what I can do is I can only play my third finger, and all the rest of my fingers here are just loose and just resting on the keys, okay? So this is a very important sort of thing to develop when we play the piano, okay? So especially with playing fast or technically demanding music, we have to make sure that our fingers are properly releasing as we go to the next note, because if we don't, again, there's going to be that underlying tension, and it's going to slow us down and cause us to not move as freely and be as immobile, okay? Let's talk a little bit about how to properly release the fingers. What it should feel like in your hand is it should feel like as I play a finger, I'm standing up on that finger, and these other fingers are not really doing anything, okay? They can just almost be just resting on the keyboard. They don't have to be touching the keyboard, but we want to make sure that they're released. They're not being held stiffly in a stiff position, okay? And then when I play to my next finger, let's say I play from 4 to 5, I want to just let that finger up. Notice how it kind of almost pops up, and that's a really good thing to make sure that you do. Just let the finger sort of like pop up and then relax, okay? And this kind of gets into the last thing we're going to talk about, which is how to practice this. The first thing that you can do is take your hand and play a single finger. Just play that finger and then take your hand up and just sort of shake it out and let that finger release, okay? And I can do this on all of my fingers and my thumb, and then just sort of shake it out to learn what it feels like from being active and passive, inactive, whatever you want to think of it, okay? So fourth finger, whatever the finger is, and then I can just release, okay? And then the progression then is I want to be able to do that, but just let the finger pop up, okay? So my hand is not gonna move, my arm's not gonna move, I still stay in this position, but I let that finger pop up, and I can use my other hand here to feel, does that finger feel loose or does it feel like it's tense, okay? They all feel pretty good. And I can do again that with all of my fingers and then just let the finger pop up, okay? So it's almost like I just release all of my muscular activity, and as the note comes back up, it sort of flings my finger back up. And sometimes it's a little bit, it feels like you have to kind of pull the finger up and then release it, okay? And then what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to play from one finger to the next finger and just release my fingers as I go, okay? So you can see how I have a very active sort of release that finger and just let it go. So first just shaking out the hand and then releasing the finger without lifting the hand, and then actually going from one finger to the next. And these are really, really good exercises. And eventually, then when you play a scale or anything else, that sort of releasing mechanism will just be natural and you won't even have to think about it. And that makes moving around the keyboard or playing really fast much, much easier because you're not fighting against that urge to keep tension in the fingers, which of course is going to slow you down, like I mentioned. A lot of times the reason why people have so much tension in their fingers and they don't know how to release them is because people say, okay, you should play the piano and pretend like you have a ball in your hand. So your hand's gonna be sort of in this shape. And the issue with this is that when you tell someone, pretend like you're grasping a ball, what happens? Immediately, fingers curl in, and all the fingers are very active. They're very active. But when we play the piano, we want the fingers to be passive until the moment at which we play a key, okay? As much as possible. There will, of course, be times where, you know, I have to prepare the fingers before I'm actually going to play them, not as I play them, if you will. But for the most part, we want the fingers to be as passive as possible when they're not in use. So I don't really like that ball in the hand sort of analogy. People can use it quite effectively, and that's fine, but that's just sort of what I've observed in my students. So I hope that this information was interesting and helpful. If you have any questions or comments, make sure and put them down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.